Okay, in this video I'd like to go over some of the different ways to print models, both directly horizontal to the build platform and vertical. And this comes up frequently when we talk about aligner cases, clear aligner cases where we're going to print a series of models with the teeth gradually moving, and with that you end up printing quite a few models. So efficiency with both the printer bed use space and also efficiency of resin use can play out, can pay dividends if you pay attention to what you're doing. So anyway, I'm going to talk about first I want to show you some of the basic ways that we print models, and this is the most basic way of all. It's just your traditional model. It's been based. I've gone over other videos on how to do that. It's a solid model, nothing too fancy about it. You can print it flat to the printer bed and then try to peel it off, or you can also print it with supports at an angle. There's various ways to print it. This is definitely the simplest way of all. Then we can then introduce the hollow model, which is the same thing from the outside or from the top, but if you look underneath, it has been hollowed out. It's 2.5 millimeters thick all around. This saves you a considerable amount of resin. About half the resin will be used, maybe 60%, but essentially it's a significant savings in resin. And so that's a great option. Now, one of the problems is if you have areas that dip down towards the print bed, those areas won't print out. This maybe is as an example right here. Generally speaking, though, it'll work just fine. You do have a little bit of flex when you're elevating it because you're not on a solid piece. But again, it works. It is an efficient use of material, but maybe not the most efficient use of the print bed itself. So now we come into the hollowed out model that's actually been plain cut. So we would cut the back end of it at an angle, and I'll talk about the angle and how we choose that angle later. You could do completely perpendicular, but again, I'll talk about why we don't want to do that in a lot of cases. But then it's also been hollowed out. This is great because you're doing the efficiency of the resin, but you're also doing efficiency in the build platform because printing this way you can stack up a lot more models, and it may take a lot longer, but you'll fit a lot of models, less turnaround of the machine. And so yeah, this is definitely an efficient way of printing them. One of the problems though is when you remove it, you have to really hold on to it securely and pop it at the same time, because if you try to elevate one side or the other, you might run the risk of cracking it. And I have done that. It's not frequent, but it's enough that it always ends up happening on the one model you really need. So that's the risk there, is that it can flex and potentially break or cause cracking somewhere in the model. And so the last option that I'm going to go over is the same thing, but with a sort of a platform that we set the model on. So now it is efficient. This amount of resin that's encompassed here is about equivalent to about right here as far as hollowing out the model. So this is about 1 ml of resin. Really, it's quite efficient. It's not a lot of resin. It looks like more than it actually is. Once again, it's 2.5 millimeters thick, and it is also beveled, which is going to make it much easier for you to get underneath and pop it off. So you've got the efficiency of resin, you've got the efficiency of printer bed usage, and you've also got the predictability of popping it off and not causing any damage. So I'm going to be talking about really this option right here. I'm going to show you guys how I go about making a model that looks like that, and in a very quick manner. So, okay, so first I'm going to open up the same exact model in another case. I've already got it open, ready to go. So the first thing I want to touch on, although I've gone over this in other videos, I still want to make sure that I mention it because it's very important that you not forget this. If you forget this, you may overcome it down the line, but you're really going to be potentially having to revisit everything. So what I'm talking about is the first thing before I do any sort of manipulation, I want the models to be parallel to the actual build platform and everything. And right now there's a can't. Now a lot of softwares will give you the correct orientation right off the get-go, but once in a while it's not quite right. And if you're going to edit it, I don't want you to think that you can just edit this one and it's not going to matter, because when you go to do alignment, if you didn't, this one's going to stay still and it's going to be hard to align. So point is, before you reorient this lower model, make sure you bring in the upper. I'm going to highlight both of these, hit the T button. T is for transform if you're looking over in the menus over here in the edit menu. I've got it fairly well leveled. Hit accept, and now it's done. At this point, I can quite literally delete this model. I don't need it anymore. I just needed it to, well, sorry. What I needed to do, I apologize, I can now export this upper now that it's been oriented, and because when I'm all done and I export this lower, they're going to be lined up still. So I don't need it for anything that I'm going to do beyond here. Honestly, I would probably hide it because I'm going to do the same thing to both models, but I'm not going to do that in this video. I'm just going to do it for the lower. So for the sake of this, I will go ahead and I'll just hide it. We don't need to look at it for now. So what I'm going to do first is my process here. I'm going to show you the steps. I'm going to read the steps to you, and then I'm going to show you what I'm actually doing. So the steps are as follows. We're going to level the arch, which we just did. We're then going to extrude it to add a base. We're going to do a distal plane cut, just like I showed you for the printing. We're then going to hollow it out. We're going to do an inferior plane cut, so along the base of it, making it shorter to make it actually have an open bottom to it. We're then going to bring in the platform that we're going to set it on, and then we're going to combine the two of those and export. This process in this video will probably be a 5 to 10 minute process as I explain the various aspects, but truthfully it's about a 2 minute, maybe 3 minute process to do once you get going. So first step is to extrude. So I'm going to hit Control A to. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and come up here to extrude, or just press the D button. Because we're going to end up clipping off the bottom, I'm going to change this. I usually go with -10, but because I am going to cut that off, I'm going to go ahead and put it as -12.5. I'm going to change the direction to the y-axis. I'm going to change the end type to flat. Click accept. Immediately I do see this little guy that's hanging down here. This appears to be an error, and although it probably will get eliminated in the long run, I'm going to go ahead and delete it now, just because I tend to do that when I see it. Kind of a I don't like to leave loose ends, you might say. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the distal plane cut. As we know from the next step, we have extruded. Now do the distal plane cut. So let's go to Edit, Plane Cut. Let's roll this to 90 degrees. We'll talk about that. First, let's move it, get it somewhat positioned where we want it, and then we'll talk about what angle we want it to be, because it's an important point. So right now, 90 degrees, you run the risk of potential overhangs not printing properly. And so I will usually go to at least a 5-degree angle. Now anytime I have a 2 millimeter or taller overhang, I want to go to 10 degrees. And what do I mean by that? This right here. Because I have an edentulous space, this tooth is essentially parallel to this. And if I were to not cut it, it might not print completely. So when you have that vertical or that horizontal overhang, we want to go ahead and put it to 10 degrees. These molars right here are not completely parallel by any stretch, so I don't worry about those. But premolars, the edentulous teeth, spaces next to them, can present this challenge. So I'm going to change this angle, not from 0 degrees, but to 10. And now I'm going to try to move this as close as I can to these teeth. and I want to make sure that these are closed. Now if I can't make it so they're closed, I will go through the process of inspecting and filling them, but I prefer to avoid that if I can. It is not always avoidable, unfortunately. I would say that most of the time I get lucky, but not always. And I'm going to walk back and forth and see if I can get to a point where they're both filled. I will not accept them to being partially filled. Sometimes you'll see where a corner of it is filled, but not the other. And if that happens, then I would rather it be completely unfilled for the repair process. And I know there's a spot here somewhere where I had them both filled. I keep passing it. Oh, and there is a little hole. I'm going to go ahead and try to go see if I can get that to approve. Okay, so if I click on Analysis, Inspector, click on that, and it's filled. So now I'm good. So I've got a solid plain cut there. Now I need to, what is the next step? Next step is to hollow it all out. Click on Edit, Hollow. I will tell you that the whole distal plain cut is the biggest issue that I run into. Everything else is very cookie cutter. It's just a matter of clicking the buttons. But that is the one time that I will occasionally run into an issue. So, okay, so now we're doing the hollow. The default is 2 millimeters. I want it 2.5. Unfortunately, there's no way to change your preference, at least that I can find in MeshMixer, so you always have to change that. I like 2.5 millimeters. It seems to make it thick enough and strong enough. So let's hit accept. And now I'm going to do the next step, which would be to do the inferior plain cut. Now this only needs to be, can be anywhere that when I look at the bottom, once again, it does not give me a hollowed out cut. I'll show you there. Now it's hollow here. Go up, 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 up until it's closed. Okay, so I can stop there. I can keep going up, whatever I feel comfortable with. If there was a tooth here, I would feel comfortable going higher, but since there's not a tooth there, I don't like to have too flimsy of a model right there. The likelihood of breaking it is pretty minimal, but still, I don't usually play around with that too much. So right here, I feel good about it. I'm going to hit accept. So we now have our hollowed out model with the plain cut in the back. The next step is going to do the position the platform. To do that, I need to bring in my platform. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to upload this file online. You can make this, it's very easy. All I did was open up MeshMixer, bring in a box. I made it the specific dimensions of 60 millimeters by 15 by 2.5. 60 by 15 by 2.5. And then I basically used that plain cut to do a 45-degree bevel cut on all 4 sides. And I did about 2 millimeters up, leaving 0.5 millimeter of flat surface. So let's take a look. Let's append, bring this in, and I'm going to come over here. Here is my print base, as I've called it. You can see if you look close, it's got this little 45-degree bevel all around it. And so now I can click the T to transform to bring this to where I need it, which is right on the back side of this. Now I know the degrees. If I go to 90, it's going to be where I would have I did a horizontal cut, but I didn't. So we're going to go to 80 degrees, and now I've got the same degree as the plain cut I did. I'm going to rough position this to make sure it sort of sticks out on both sides of this. One thing I want to do as far as this positioning, I want to try and have it as these areas as close to the top as I can. Now one's a little taller than the other, so I'm going to pick the tallest one. I don't want it to overhang. It can, it's not going to really matter most likely. Like I said, that whole 2 millimeters, but I try to get kind of close to it because this is about maximizing the print bed. The farther that sticks away, the farther I have to have another object away from it. Now this part that sticks out isn't a big deal because this is where the print bed's going to be. If you carry that line over, this is probably overhanging off of that, which is fine. As far as printer bed use, that's what you're looking for. So right now, I just want to make sure there's no gap. I can intersect all the way into the green for all I care. I just don't want a gap. Okay? So everything looks good. It's fully on it on this side. It's fully on it on that side. And if I wanted, I could hit OK, hit T again, and now I can expand and make it wider if I needed. If my model was a really large mouth or a really small one, and I wanted to save a little bit, sure, there's no big deal there. But the default that I've gone with is the measurements I found seems to work most predictably, and then I edit from there. If I had a really short model, I could also make it shorter, or I could go ahead and make it taller if necessary as well. But again, very rarely do I mess with that. The width one will be the most likely time to adjust it, but generally speaking is not necessary. So we now have that positioned. The next step is going to be to combine them. We've got this model and this model. I held the control button just to highlight both of them. I'm going to click combine. And now all I need to do is export. This model is now complete. I can hit Control E to export, but I'm not going to really worry about that right now, because now you can see when we're working on this case, we can now bring this into our orthodontic software like BlueSkyPlan, move the teeth around, and everything else along this base, since we're not moving this as a tooth, we're not moving anything else, it's all going to stay the same. The only thing you have to be careful of is if you have to do some extreme movements. I mean, this lateral right here is going to undergo a lot of movement, but it's still not a truly extreme movement in the case that the underside here is not going to change. Every model is going to look the same up down there. The only thing that's going to move is the outer side out here. So if a tooth did have to move, hypothetically, this tooth is going to move all the way over to here, you could potentially run into some issues. As you might have a hole right here. Again, it's so unlikely, and if that were the case, just don't hollow it out, or make the thickness 4 millimeters or something other than 2.5 millimeters. That's the only thing you're going to run into. But again, I've never encountered that. It's never been an issue, but and I don't think you will. But there you go. If you have that problem or you anticipate that, that would be your solution. So, just to give you a quick example of what this would look like on a printer bed, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click Control Shift G, Control A to highlight the whole thing, because I want you to just see what it looks like after you've exported it. Control Shift G, which removes the surface groups so that it all looks the same color. So if I turn on the printer bed, this isn't something you would do. I'm just not opening up a printer software. I just want to kind of give you an idea of what it would look like. Let's align it. And again, you're not going to be doing any of this in your software. I'm just doing this for visual example, if you will. Okay. And so now you can see that this allows you to stack many models very closely, and you make absolute maximal use of your print bed. Very efficient. You can fill your print bed quite full. Okay, so hopefully that, again, you wouldn't be printing multiple models like I did as far as duplicating. I mean, if you were for some example cases potentially, but this is more like when you bring in all your aligner models, you could stack them up very neat and tidy, and use very little or fit as many models on at a time as you wanted. So, Alright, well I hope this helps. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and look out for some of the other videos.